Well, welcome to another Cliff's List webinar interview. Today, my special guest is Patrick James, a new rising star in the community of dating advice experts. And Patrick, I think probably a lot of people watching this are not familiar with who you are because I think you're kind of new in a way. But it sounds like from our discussion that you've actually been around a little bit longer than maybe people realize or will know. So why don't you give a little introduction to people, to anyone who hasn't heard of you or doesn't know about you, and your experience, your history, and what you do.
Yeah, so basically, I'm a dating coach based out of Phoenix, Arizona. I've been doing this for the last 4 to 5 years. I actually dropped out of dental school to become a dating coach, so you can only imagine the backlash from the family and the friends, where you're about to be a doctor, and then you're like, just kidding. I want to teach guys how to pick up chicks, and so that's what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. It's kind of been more like locally and, starting to get a YouTube channel, a YouTube following. And then recently the YouTube channel picked up. I recently came out with a book, and that's kind of taken the whole dating industry by storm, which eventually led to me getting the attention of Cliff's List. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor. And I know you've been around for a while. And we were just talking about this before, but I've been doing this, I've been teaching this for like the last 4 years. And then about 3 years prior to that, I was going out and taking massive action myself. And yeah, pretty much what I was telling you was, unlike a lot of the people who get into teaching it, I wasn't one of those guys who maybe dived into every single book and every single forum, and I was in the forums all night. I was one of those guys who found one or two mentors in game that I really vibed with their advice, their style of talking to women. Maybe their personality was similar to mine. And I kind of took what they told me and I took massive action on it and ran with it. And because of that, I feel like a lot of what I teach has similarities to where guys who have been in dating advice for a while can really understand what I'm talking about, and I can articulate it well for those guys. But as well as me just being a guy who originally sucked with girls and was just terrible and needed like that lifeline. And coming out of that by taking massive action, I've kind of got kind of a unique twist to where I can speak from experience and really help the guys who are where I was about 7 years ago, if that makes sense at all.
Would you say you've got a I guess a method or a formula that you use, or is it really just sort of individual things that you use for specific situations?
Well, that's the thing, is the more I kind of do this and take action and even teach it, because as well as I do that, you never really truly master something until you can start teaching it. And when you start teaching it, you learn even more about it and you get better at it. And so what I've come to realize up until the day over the last 7 years is that what I really try to harp on is that there's a natural tension between men and women already, right? You put any man and a woman into a room, you leave them there for long enough, they're going to start flirting with each other. There's a little bit of tension there, right? And so for me, with everything I teach, I'm trying to get guys to take advantage of that natural sexual tension that's already there, right? So when you attract a woman, it's not like you're creating tension out of thin air and you have to like create it. All you got to do is find where that tension is and amplify it. Right. So if you're walking down the hallway, most guys can relate to this. If you walk down a hallway and there's a girl walking towards you going in the opposite direction, right? Have you ever thought to yourself in those moments, should I make eye contact with her? Should I smile? Should I say hi? Or should I pull out my phone and act like I just got a text message? Well, that awkward tension right there is that natural tension that already exists between two individuals, especially men and women. And what I try to do in all of my advice is use those different moments, those windows of opportunity that you get with women that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, no matter where you are or what time of the day it is. And how do you really use that natural tension and amplify it in a way to where it builds attraction, connection, rapport, trust, and really guide that and lead that interaction to wherever you want to lead it.
Let me give you a big question here, because you started off saying that when you first got into it, you were learning it obviously for your own skills. Tell me about the path or the realizations or whatever it was that went from just taking action. Like I've known lots of guys that taken a lot of action, and it's like they're running in place and not going anywhere.
Yeah.
What actions, like what was it that sort of shifted from I guess non-success to success?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So basically, when I was like 21 years old, I was a virgin still. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 21, 28 now. And at the time, I had really liked these two girls, right? It started off with liking one of them, and it was one of those situations to where like I just didn't even I had like negative game. It wasn't even game, right? I would kind of just like talk to her. I didn't know what flirting was. I was just like, oh, we talk to each other a lot. We text each other a lot. We must kind of almost be dating, right? And just long story short, that didn't really pan out the way I wanted to. She started dating some other dude when I thought, oh, we had a thing, right? And so that really crushed me, right? And almost in spite of her, there was one girl, because we're all coworkers. There's one girl who she hated, and it was this other girl who worked with us, and this girl happened to have the same name as her. And so because these two girls hated each other, and it was kind of like known that me and this one girl were talking, I started talking to the other girl, just to like get this other girl's attention, right? And, long story short, history repeated itself because I didn't change, right? I was the same exact person. And that one, it was kind of the same, where we talked a little bit, we flirted a little bit. I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to lead the interaction forward. And it led to obviously her getting bored, seeing some other guys, and then me just kind of getting left in the dust, not really knowing what to do, not really having much hope for anything. And I'll be honest, man, like I don't talk about this a lot, but when I was 21 years old, and I skipped the part where I'd lost my virginity with this random girl at a party. That's a whole other different story. But that was almost kind of like by accident, right? But with these two girls, Tony Robbins always says, like, the only way people change is through inspiration or desperation or both. For me, these two girls who I thought were like, almost destined. I thought they were the one at the time, right? The way that guys tend to talk about women when they're in scarcity, like I was. And after that happened, and after none of those really panned out, I really thought that I was going to be the type of guy who just was single for the rest of my life. I thought I was going to be the type of guy who maybe never had sex, and there was no hope for me in dating, and I was just about to accept that reality. But once again, I was in an all-time low. Inspiration, desperation for both. For me, it was both. And luckily enough, random luck. Do you know who Bobby Rio and Rob Judge is?
Sure.
Yeah. So this is way back when, and I think I'd seen some of their stuff through a Facebook ad, and I clicked it. It was like top 5 reasons why you're in the friend zone, right? And that was like, I'm not saying that their product changed my life, but that was like kind of my entry into the dating niche. At the time, I wasn't Googling like how to pick up chicks. I wasn't trying to go out and sleep with 100 women. I just wanted that one or two, like that one girl back, right? I just wanted to know why I didn't get the results that I had. And that little spark for me to like know that there's some hope for me. Like there's people out there teaching me how to do this a little bit better than I was doing, right? I didn't even know there was a strategy other than me just being a man going about my life. And that one experience led to me going out and approaching a girl at a bar for the very first time. Literally, I'm just trying to take action because I'm in a place where I have nothing else to do. I don't know what else to do. And I remember that first time I approached a girl, she was engaged, but for whatever reason, she entertained a conversation with me at a random bar. And at the end, I like asked her for a number just for the hell of it, and she reluctantly gave it to me. But here's the thing, man. I think this is going back to your question. I tend to tell long stories, but going back to your question, when she gave me her number, even though she was engaged and I think she wasn't even from the same hometown, I was just like, holy crap. I didn't even know it was possible for someone to go to a bar and talk to someone who's not associated with their friends group. I didn't even know that was a thing, approaching people you don't know. And not only that, but getting this girl's phone number. Had she been single, had she actually been in my area, there was every possibility that I could have texted her and started dating her. And I think that one little small like light at the end of the tunnel almost was all I needed, all the hope I needed to really just take massive action. And, we can get into this a little bit more, but like, I'm not the type of guy who I'm just going to try something over and over and over again if it's not working, right? I'm obviously going to see the light at the end of the tunnel and really like use that as my motivation moving forward to knowing that there is another level. There is another way to do this successfully. And because of that, obviously I took a massive action. I course corrected as I went along the way. Obviously developed my skill set as a guy who's out there in the dating world. And, 7 years later, here I am.
Well, tell me about that course correction. What, give me some examples of what you've adjusted and modified, because, I see a lot of guys these days, they approach women and just get nowhere. And,
Yeah.
A lot of them are fairly good conversationalists. They're taking action, and it's just not having the success. And I'm wondering what you have done or what you learned that changed that.
Yeah. So it's all about, I really take the experimental mindset, right? I think I told you this. I can't remember if it was before the call or at the beginning of the call, but basically before I even got into any of this, like I was on the path to being a doctor, right? I was going to go to medical school, and then I decided I wanted to be a dentist and own my own practice. So I got into dental school, moved out to to Glendale, Arizona, which is right next to like Phoenix and Scottsdale and all that. And, to get to that point, to be that type of person who's going to be a doctor, right? You learn a lot about science, right? And so my whole time with dating, right, in anything in life, I really take an experimental approach. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this one thing and then observe what happens. And does it work or does it not work? Is it the best result I could have gotten or not? And if not, or if so, like, what can I do differently next time to maybe potentially get a better result that following time, right? So even from the beginning, whether it's approaching women, getting their numbers, hooking up with girls, asking them to meet up with you on the first date, all those different things, right? I was like, okay, I'm faced with a fork in the road and I don't know what to do. And maybe I have like 1 or 10 options, whatever. I'm going to be the type of guy who decisively chooses to take one course of action, whether I know it's the right action or not, and just see what happens. And then whether or not I get the result I want in that moment, I'm going to reflect back on it later on. Maybe it's the next day or later that night, and then say, okay, what can I do better next time to improve on that result? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And now let's get some specifics about what you adjusted in terms of your approaching of women.
Yeah. So I think when I first started, like I mentioned, with those 2 girls who really just like curb stomped my heart, right? And it was all because I didn't even, like, if you asked me, Patrick, at the time, right? At the time, if you asked me, Patrick, what is flirting? How do you flirt? I would have had no clue. I would have been like, I don't know. You just talk to her and you'd be cool. And that's a guy who really, he's like, they say you're unconsciously incompetent, right? You don't even know what you don't know. Right. And so that's where I was. And so specifically, I remember my strategy for success back then was I'm going to talk to this girl, whether if she's a coworker or just someone I happen to meet through friends, right? I'm going to talk to her and I'm going to build an amazing connection with her. Because at the time, I'm not necessarily a worse conversationalist today than I was back then. I'm great at just talking to people, right? But the one thing I learned that I wasn't doing from back then to what I do now is I wasn't taking advantage of that tension. I wasn't amplifying any tension. In fact, I tried to avoid breaking rapport. I tried to avoid any awkward tension in any interaction with women. And I would try to build rapport and build a connection and find commonalities and show her how perfect we are for each other. And in my own head back then, I was like, well, if I show her how perfect we are for each other, then maybe she'll one day conclude that, we are a good match sexually. And then, it'll be off to the races. And that's kind of like the classic Hollywood mentality towards seduction, towards dating. And that's totally the way that was my strategy for success back then. So the big mindset shift, the big paradigm shift when I really got into this is, no, if you want to connect with a girl, you can do that, but it has to be built on a foundation of attraction. Now, the question is, how do you attract women? How do you spark that little, the spark of intrigue to where she's like, oh, this guy's different. He's interesting. I want to get to know more about him, to where now not only are you trying to actively show that maybe you guys are potentially a good fit, but now you're like almost getting her to qualify herself, qualify and basically sell herself to you on why she thinks you guys may be a good fit sexually, or why, you guys should be together, right? It's completely different because, back then, if you want to visualize it, I was thinking connection first, and then over time attraction happens, and then you guys kind of have sex from there. Now, obviously, the one specific example is I'm like, okay, maybe break rapport at the beginning, spike a little bit of tension, create a little bit of intrigue, and then after that's kind of, the playful banter, that's where you build the connection on top of that foundation of attraction. And that one specific mindset shift was one of the ones I had early on, and it's really kind of the foundation for a lot of what I teach today.
Okay. I guess how would you advise guys to do exactly that themselves?
Right. So this is pretty fundamental stuff, and I'm sure you can definitely like chime in as well with your examples as well. I'd love to hear those. But so basically, going back to that example, right? Sparking attraction and then building a connection on the foundation of attraction. The way I define attraction, and in fact, I have a whole book on this. I think it kind of changes throughout the course of your interaction, right? So obviously, if you meet a girl out in public or at a bar, wherever you meet her, right, the first 3 to 5 minutes of your conversation is obviously going to be a lot different than your conversation when you're 3 hours into that interaction, right? So for me, the way I kind of define that spark, that tension, is I'm like, okay, early in the conversation, all you really want to do is use that natural tension between you guys and really create the intrigue to where you guys are really more curious about getting to know more about each other, to where you're actually like popping up on her sexual radar. Most guys kind of blend in. They try to go into interview mode, asking like the boring questions, trying to build the connection like I was before, right? But if I kind of flip that on its head, and early on in the interaction, rather than saying, where are you from? What do you do? What brings you here tonight? Oh, that's cool, right? And it's kind of like this boring conversation. What if I break rapport? Maybe I ask her, okay, what do you do? Or even better, I could guess, okay, you seem like pretty intuitive. You seem like, let me guess, you're a nursing student, right? Me just guessing what she does is obviously a lot different than me saying, hey, what do you do? Because that kind of sparks the interview mode type of conversation, right? And then when no matter what she says to that, and no matter my guess, it could be completely random. It doesn't fucking matter what I guess she is. I go, oh, you're one of those girls. We'll never get along, right? If I break rapport early on, a lot of guys are so afraid to break rapport with a woman because, like I said, if your strategy for success is trying to build a connection and build rapport with these women off the bat, then breaking rapport is almost kind of like counterintuitive. And they think, oh crap, I don't want to do that. Maybe she'll think I'm an asshole. Maybe she won't like me if I do that. And so what I found is actually that doesn't happen. When you break rapport and you're not a dickhead about it, you say it with a little bit of a playful tonality, and you really just showcase that that's really just a part of your personality. You joke, you flirt, you banter. That right there, early on in the interaction, is going to create that intrigue for her to actually for you to actually stand out among the 10 other dudes who've already talked to her that night if you're in a social environment. And then, it's off to the races from there. And there's that's just one of the common themes, one of the many ways that you can do it early on in the conversation. Does that kind of make sense to answer your question?
Yeah. So you're a big proponent of breaking rapport in order to create attraction, basically.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I'll be honest, man. At this point, for me specifically, I wouldn't say that's less important to build attraction, right? For me, I'm all about being congruent and not necessarily changing my behaviors to attract women, right? You asked me a specific example, and that was just one of them. But let's say, of all the guys watching this interview or listening to this audio right now, let's say you're just starting out and your strategy for success is, you want to build connection with a girl, and then over time she'll eventually realize oh crap, maybe I like this guy. Maybe we'll go on a date. Maybe there's attraction there, right? And if that's your strategy for success, well, obviously it's not working out for you, or else you wouldn't be listening to this. And if that's you, and if you're in the position that I was in, then yeah, I would recommend getting used to breaking rapport with women. Now, to say that that's the best way to spark attraction, absolutely not. In fact, I was literally at a restaurant the other night with a buddy of mine, and this girl, our waitress at the sushi restaurant, actually gave me her phone number. She wrote it in the checkbook, right, and put it on top of the receipt. And then she came and hung out with us back at his place after she got off work that night, right? But here's the thing. I wasn't necessarily like, doing any push-pull lines or breaking rapport with her. I think the most important thing for you to do and for you to realize if you want to attract women is to not change yourself to appease others, and then not be afraid to let your full personality shine. Right. And the way I'll give you a specific example with that specific waitress. I remember this is just random example. I remember she was like talking about how she went to Taco Bell and ate at Taco Bell the other night. And I was like, that's awesome. I had Taco Bell last night too. What did you get from Taco Bell? And when I say, what did you get from Taco Bell? I'm kind of saying it from like almost like a tonality to where I'm almost implying that I'm going to totally judge her based on her answer, right? And if you want to say, really dissect that, me using that tonality is in a sense breaking rapport, because it's a breaking rapport tonality, right? Whereas secret rapport, I'm like, oh my God, what'd you get from Taco Bell? I love Taco Bell, right? It's a subtle difference in my tonality. And in that moment when I said, oh my God, what'd you get from Taco Bell? I had Taco Bell last night too. That's awesome, right? I'm not necessarily breaking rapport verbally with her. And I remember she goes, oh, I had a cheesy gordita crunch, which very ironically was exactly what I had from Taco Bell. And keep in mind, this is a sushi restaurant. And so what I did, not inhibiting myself at all, not changing myself at all, I kind of just did this big gesture. And I took my chopsticks and I threw them on the table. I was like, no shit. And the chopsticks went flying. And I was like, that's awesome, right? Not breaking rapport, complimenting her. We just found a commonality. But what would the guy who's like afraid to break rapport, afraid to take risks, afraid to, really be himself in front of a girl who he just met, who also happens to be his waitress, he would be like, oh my God, that's cool. That's awesome. I like cheesy gordita crunches too. But me, it was like completely unexpected reaction. So I think to say that the best way to attract women is to break rapport, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say, if anything, like just whatever your natural personality is, don't be afraid to amplify it and don't be afraid to show it, and definitely don't change it just to maybe appease this girl who you don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I guess the thing that I notice about you is that you've got a lot of energy, and you're the kind of guy that's got a lot of things to say just in general. And I think that those are major assets when it comes to meeting women. I guess how do you handle your clients that you meet that just are just not like that? What do you do with them? How do you get them to change?
Well, that's the thing is, I think for me, I haven't always been super outgoing or like just super uninhibited in it, for lack of a better term. I think it really just comes from practice, right? If you would have seen me approach that first girl that I told you about a long time ago, and she was engaged, she was from a different city, and she reluctantly gave me her phone number, probably just to throw me a bone because I had the look of desperation on my face. If you would have saw me then, you would have seen a completely different person. You would have seen a guy who was a little bit inhibited, who was afraid of social interaction with people who I had nothing in common with and had no mutual friends with, and no reason to be talking to them other than the fact that maybe we happen to be in the same venue, right? I was a completely different person. The way I got to where I am now is obviously years of like releasing those negative habits, but it's really just like doing a lot of self-reflection. Why am I like, if you have trouble opening up and being free-flowing in conversation, you got to ask yourself, where does that stem from? And you really got to think about it, right? Does it stem from low self-esteem? Does it stem from you being afraid that other people are going to judge you? Does it stem from if you do start talking and letting your personality shine and being a little bit more extroverted in the moment, even if it takes a little bit of conscious effort and pushing yourself to start, right? Because it's like a muscle. The more you practice it, the more you work it out, the easier it's going to be over time. And for me, it was really, the reason I was different back then is because I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid of really just like almost changing my identity and reinventing myself, right? The people I knew, they saw me as a certain person. And when I was around them, they expected me to be that way. And for me to act out of character from what people expected, it was really a big shock for them. They resisted it. They told me, dude, what are you doing? Why are you talking to those people? Why you have amazing, like wide open body language now? Why are you trying so hard, right? And you're going to get that type of backlash. And I think that's where a lot of people really struggle when they start taking action. And I always say this, like, Cliff, do you know what the Kuiper belt is?
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, so I love space and like, you know, talking about space and the stars, and astronomy was my favorite class, right? So the Kuiper belt is basically, if you imagine our solar system, outside of our solar system, there's this belt of like asteroids, right? And so obviously the first obstacle, if we want to start traveling to other solar systems, is we got to find a way to get out of our own solar system. That's the first challenge. The second challenge is, how do we get past that belt, the field of asteroids that lies beyond our solar system, right? That's the Kuiper belt. And so the way I always say it to the guys who that I coach, my clients, or even the guys who follow me on YouTube, I'm like, the hardest part is not taking action, taking that first step, approaching that girl, fixing your body language, being more outgoing, being more free flowing in conversation, breaking rapport. Dude, that's awesome if you learn how to do that. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is that second challenge after you've overcome that first challenge, which is the Kuiper belt to your comfort zone, which is all your family, all your friends, all the people you know who see the different behavior out of you. It's going to be them resisting your changing. It's going to be them seeing you growing as a person, seeing you trying to improve yourself, and then they're going to try to pull you back down and criticize you for wanting to grow, wanting to change, wanting to become a better, more outgoing type of person, because the way they view you, their impression of you, is not the way you're acting now, right? So that right there is the Kuiper belt to your comfort zone. And I forget like exactly why I brought that up, but the point I'm trying to make here is, like, if you right now are shy or introverted or whatnot, I think you really got to ask yourself, where does that stem from? Is it because you're afraid of getting judged by others, or because you haven't really worked out that muscle that much, trying to be more outgoing and more talkative in conversation? I guess, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, basically, I guess I wanted to ask you about some of the other typical challenges and sticking points that you deal with with your clients. Like, you know, obviously one of them is becoming more energetic and talkative, but you know, I'm sure there's other problems that they face. You know, they're too short, they're too ugly, in their opinion. Like, what are some of the solutions that you offer to some of these guys?
So, what your question basically, if a guy is maybe worried that he can't get the results he wants in his dating life because maybe he's too short, maybe he's overweight, these types of things, like the physical characteristics,
those things, you know, what are the challenges that you see commonly from your clients, and what are your solutions you typically offer them?
All right. So for my clients, I've seen a lot of a wide range, right? I have multiple personal clients, and then I have a lot of guys who invest in my courses, invest in my products, who are on my email list. And I see the whole spectrum. I see guys who were literally exactly like I was. Maybe they're in their 20s. They're not very sexually experienced, and they want to bust out of that, right? And then I get a whole other segment of guys who are maybe fresh out of a long-term relationship or a long-term marriage, and they really don't even know where to start when it comes back to getting into the dating scene, right? And so obviously the sticking point here is we got to get them out of scarcity with women and get them into a more abundance just type of dating lifestyle, whether it's just realizing that they can be the type of person who can date whoever they want and instilling that confidence in them, or just teaching them how to go out and start meeting a lot of women, right? And so some of these guys want advice on, you know, texting. Maybe they're fine at meeting women, approaching them, getting their phone number, and then when it comes to texting and getting them out on a date, they really struggle with that. Or, you know, a lot of times, if it's the guys who really just have never approached a girl before, they don't have a lot of experience, and the women they've dated in the past are maybe coworkers or friends of friends or classmates, right? How do we get them out of scarcity there? Well, I got to teach them what I call the superpower. And this is it's no new mystery, but it's like the way I view approaching women is literally half the people in the world are women. Everywhere you go, there's probably every other person is probably going to be a female, right? And if you develop what I think is a superpower to be able to confidently stroll up to any woman that you find intriguing and start a meaningful conversation with her, and lead that conversation wherever you want to go, I think that's the best way to meet women. And regardless of the apps and the sites that pop up over time, over the coming years, that will be the one way that sticks around for forever is seeing a person that you find intriguing and then walking up to them and starting a conversation with them. And for a lot of guys, I'll be honest, when we start working together, especially if they're in so much pain to where they're seeking out one-on-one help from a person like myself or yourself, it's a lot of guys who don't have the confidence to be able to do that. And so, to be honest, man, that's where I start with a lot of my clients, but it ranges.
Okay, so I guess you get a wide range of guys with challenges, because some of the people I do interviews with, they find that a lot of the problems are very common among the clients, and I guess I was curious if that was your experience as well.
Yeah, I would say that's the number one sticking point that I get. But here's the thing: is like that's just what I see on a day-to-day basis, because those are the types of guys who are in enough pain to where they're seeking out my help and they're willing to invest in a private coaching session like that, right? And so I see a lot of the guys personally that I talk to over Skype or over the phone who need to learn how to go out and approach a girl that they find intriguing in public, right? But there's a whole, like I said, there's a whole range. So I would say that's the most common thing I see. But then after that, because that's not going to take you years to learn how to do effectively, right? After that, it's the texting to get girls on the first date or even the second date, or just I would say it's mainly the texting and then also just spiking attraction. A lot of people tend to have platonic conversations. Maybe they can talk for 3 hours, but over the 3 hours, was there any sexual tension built? Was there any indication that this is an interaction to where I'm potentially interested in this person sexually? Or is it the same kind of conversation that you could have had with a good friend who also maybe happens to have a penis? Right. So those are the main sticking points: is the sparking conversation and attraction, approaching women, and then really just texting them.
Okay. And do you find that some of your clients are like really hard cases? And have you had to sort of really go the extra mile for some of these guys? And like, what would be the how would your approach be when they're really giving you a hard time accepting your advice?
To be honest, man, if I'm going to work with someone one-on-one, whether it's like Skype or coaching, before I even get to that point, I'm going to highly qualify them. And this is just from a business standpoint, that's what I do. But even in dating, like for the guys who maybe just want to watch the online stuff, right? Qualifying people for your dating life is definitely a valuable skill, and it's a way to build attraction and to frame yourself as a prize, which are all good things. And it gets women chasing you, and it shows that maybe you're not the type of guy who's like everybody else is going to pursue women just because you think she's hot, whether or not you have anything in common, whether or not she meets your standards. So I take that approach to my dating life. I teach that approach to guys going out and meeting women. But when I'm working with a guy one-on-one and he's investing in phone coaching with me, before I even accept payment from him, I'm going to highly qualify him as the type of person who's coachable, as the type of person who's willing to take instruction that maybe he's never done before. And I'm really going to minimize the risk that he's going to be lazy and not take action, basically, right? So if I'm working with a guy one-on-one, and I definitely get guys who, as you would say, is a hard case, right? As long as he's willing to take action, and as long as he's willing to step outside of his comfort zone and maybe do some things that he's never done before, then I always say, like, I can take a horse to water, but I can't get him to drink. So as long as he invests in himself, takes action, and takes this seriously, and this is a priority to him, right? There's no reason why we can't succeed with each other. And so I definitely have clients who come to me, virgins, maybe they've only been on one date before in their life, and it was maybe homecoming, their sophomore year of high school. And then we completely, give them success, whatever their definition of success is, whether it's a date a week with a girl, or maybe it's finding one awesome girlfriend that maybe they can start developing more of a long-term relationship. And I've definitely had those types of cases. It's really about defining what you want and what success means to you, and then being the type of person who's willing to take action, especially if those actions are stuff that you haven't done in the past. And if you can do those things, then, you know, the sky's the limit for you.
Have you been like mostly focused on, I guess, pickup rather, you know, like just approaching women in, I'm not sure, during the day or during the night, or is there some other place that you advise as being more preferable as a place to meet women?
It's a great question. So for me, I've always kind of resisted the label of like what I teach or even what I do as pickup. Technically, and I'll tell you why here in a second, but technically it's the same thing. Going out, seeing a woman that you find attractive and approaching her. And I definitely went through the pickup phase, right? But what I'm finding is like, especially a lot of the guys who vibe with my advice, they're not necessarily the types of guys who want to become pickup artists and go out and approach 20 girls a day or 100 girls a day and sacrifice sleep every night to go out to the clubs and pick up women, right? And a lot of times these guys who are coming to me for coaching or even investing in my courses and products, they're not necessarily the types of guys who want to go out and rack up the numbers. There is definitely some of those guys on my list and some of those guys who follow me. But what I really try to do, just because this is what the way I was, is I'm going to give you the tools, the fundamental tools to know how to build attraction, know how to have an awesome conversation with these girls and build that type of high value connection, and then lead that conversation or the interaction or the relationship with her to wherever you want to go. Because the way I see it, attraction and all of those things, they're just fundamental tools in your tool belt. And whether you want to use it to rack up the numbers or find that one awesome girl in your life to who's your ride or die woman, I really want to take me as a coach. My only goal when I'm working with someone is to take them from a place of scarcity to abundance, to where if they want to rack up the numbers, cool, you have the tools. Or if they want to find that one awesome girlfriend, I'm giving them the opportunity to find her and choose her from a place of abundance, to where if they start dating one girl into a long-term relationship, they didn't start dating her because it was a, you know, she's my only option right now and I'm going and I kind of like it, right? It's more of a place to where I have 8 girls that I can text right now and go hang out with and maybe like go to the bar down the street or go out to lunch today. And this one girl happens to stand out above all of them. So I'm going to choose her from the 8 girls that I could be with, right? And so I really just want to take guys, no matter what their goal is for the dating life, from a place of scarcity to abundance, and you know, they can lead it from there. Whether they want to become a pickup artist, that's fine. Or they just want to be a cool dude who knows, who has the confidence to go out and find that one awesome ride or die chick. What I teach is almost like a step before, to where I give you the tools to be able to lead it where you want to go.
Okay. I believe you mentioned that you talked about your texting game. I'm curious about your thoughts on online game. I know that, I know a lot of guys lately, I've been hearing that they just don't get any responses from women. And they just don't really understand what they can do better. I met a guy actually last weekend who he had hired a stylist. He is now in the gym, but he's, you know, there's nothing, he's got a very normal looking appearance. He hired a stylist. He hired a photographer to take better pictures from him, for himself to put up on his online data, and just no results whatsoever. And I guess I'm curious, like, what, if anything, what's your experience with online dating today, and what advice do you give on that?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, man. I never really got big into the online stuff like Tinder and Bumble or Match or any of that stuff. From the very start, for me, I was always just going out and then approaching women. And for me, like I said earlier, like when I first did it, that was something that I didn't even realize was possible. But when I started, it kind of became an addiction for me. And I kind of really got, you know, I really wanted to become the best at it, right? And so for me, with online dating and all that stuff and texting, as far as the online dating, I have buddies like Rob Judge, who we both know, and guys like that who they love Tinder, they love Bundle, they love the Bumble, they love all the online stuff. And I really like, I'll refer guys to them. But as far as like, if I have a client who really wants to pursue online dating, I always literally like, I would always recommend, obviously, get the good pictures. And there's definitely, I have like 5 core pictures that I always talk about that you want to have, just because they kind of like showcase different sides of your personality. But as far as like me with like texting and stuff, the way I always say it is like, if a girl if she's attracted to you and there's interest there, regardless of your texting game, whatever you send her, right? If she really likes you, she'll go to the ends of the fucking earth to see you, right? So if it's literally the classic, the football player from a D1 college, the guy has abundance with women and he can text, he can have the least creative text, but if he texts a girl goes, oh my God, he texted me and he wants me to come over at 2 a.m., right? But at the same time, the guy who maybe has no attraction from that girl, right? She doesn't even know he exists. Maybe she gave her number to him randomly at a bar. If he texts her the same kind of stuff, right, she may or may not respond. But at the same time, she's instantly responding and getting giddy and excited from that one guy. So I think it really comes down to, and this is why I liked approaching more than online stuff, is because I could set that impression early on before I even get her phone number. That way, when I go to text her, there's already interest and trust and rapport there to where she's interested in seeing me in the future. And all the right frames were already set, right? And so for guys, if you're struggling with maybe flakiness or lack of responsiveness, the way to expand on what I said earlier, right? If she is not agreeing to meet up with you on a date or see you in person, it's simply because seeing you right then and there was not yet a priority of hers, right? So what you got to do is spark a little bit more tension for her to want to see you in the future, right? So as far as texting goes, we can go down this rabbit hole. So basically, when I say tension with texting, what I'm referring to is the feeling that a person gets that drives them to take a certain action, right? So when you are hungry, you feel that tension in your body, in your stomach, and you go, oh my God, I'm hungry. I need to go get food. So you get up off your ass, you go over to the fridge and you grab some food and start eating it. That tension drove you to take an action, right? So for a woman to want to see a guy and actually follow through with it, there needs to be that tension there to where that tension builds up to where she's like, I kind of want to see this guy and I want to see him now, right? And if she flakes on you, there just wasn't any tension there. So first off, before we even talk about what to do, let's talk about what not to do, the stuff that's going to kill that tension. Over texting her for the sake of just building a connection, right? Obviously, if you're validating her over text, you're complimenting her, good morning, beautiful, good night, beautiful. I mean, just having conversation over text, right? And this is all happening on her phone, conveniently delivered to her pocket, and she doesn't have to go out of her house to have this conversation with you. Then obviously she's not going to go out of her house to have that conversation with you in person, right? So that's going to kill the tension to want to see you, right? Another thing is, so over texting or just not really sending her like boring ass texts, like the types of texts that every other dude would send. So, hey, how you doing? How was your day? Right? There's no incentive for a woman, especially if she's a cute girl. She has other dudes hitting her up, other dudes trying to get her out, right? Which, for the sake of example, I'm just going to assume that this woman has other guys who are interested in her. That way, it kind of raises the bar and challenges me to shine through a little bit. So I'm going to make my text in whatever way a little bit more unique. So that way, when it pops up, it almost interrupts her pattern and it becomes a reason for her to respond to me or even get the interest to respond to me. And then another one is like early on in the dating process, right? Maybe you haven't slept with this girl, or you've only been on one date, or you haven't even been on your first date with her. The only reason I'm going to text her is to see her again in the near future, right? It goes back again to if I'm over texting her or if I'm texting her for any other reason than to meet up in person, then she has no reason to actually want to see me in person. If 3 weeks from now we've had 100 texts between each other and that's all the interaction, there's obviously no reason for her to even want to see you in person.
Well, you mentioned making your text a little unique. What would you do as an example for that type of thing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to do that, but it's really just like, so if I'm about to text a girl for the first time and I get her number at a bar, right? I can say, hey, it was nice meeting you, right? Awesome. It was awesome to meet you. Hey, it was nice meeting you. This is Patrick, whatever, right? That's what most guys would send. And that's good. But what if her name was Brittany? And I said, hey, red dress Brittany, this is Patrick, the tall half Asian man who you couldn't keep your hands off of last Saturday. Hope the rest of your weekend was as dashing as you are. Smiley face. gets across the same message, but it's a little bit more playful. Maybe I come up with a playful nickname for her, and I kind of jokingly tease her about flirting with me, right? And that first text immediately is a huge pattern interrupt, even though it's the same exact message, essentially, as, hey, this is Patrick, nice meeting you last Saturday, right? But I made it a little bit more specific, using playful nicknames, banter a little bit in that way, right? Just a playful nickname is, off the top of my head, the easiest way to make your text a little bit more unique, right? So any text you send her, whether it's the first text or the 10th text you've ever sent this girl, if you want to say, hey, how was your day? Come up with a playful nickname. Hey, Red Dress Brittany, how was your day? Something like that, right? That's just one way to make your text a little bit more unique.
Okay. And I guess I'm curious a little bit more about how you developed your own abundance attitude, and again, how do you convey that to someone who's really coming from a place of scarcity?
So define scarcity. What do you mean by scarcity?
Scarcity is a guy who just feels he has no women,
Right.
Yeah, and that, if he meets one, it's like she's so precious that he puts her on a pedestal and makes it so important to him that it's it obviously becomes more easy to lose because he hasn't really got it, and he's afraid to lose it all the time.
Yeah. So those guys definitely work with a lot of guys like that. So right off the bat, I would ask them basically the questions about, like, exactly what I did to you. Like, what are your goals here? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you going through right now? Where are you at in your dating life right now? Right. So if a guy comes to me and he's exactly how you described, what I would say immediately right off the bat is, if you want to get out of scarcity, it's not about having the outward symbols that say, okay, I'm finally in abundance with women, I'm finally in abundance with money. It's all about developing the mindset, like, dude, that girl's not the one for you, the one, and no other girl is compatible with you, right? That's completely false. So let's just get rid of that at all, right? Because if you think that there's only one girl for you in this world, automatically, to even start, before you even start anything, taking action, you're already putting yourself in scarcity, and you're not leaving the door open for you to ever have anything other than scarcity, because that's the only one girl who's going to fulfill you as a person, right? So let's stop that belief, and let's just pretend for a little bit that maybe there are other women in your area who maybe have compatibilities with you that you could be fulfilled dating, having sex with already, right? So let's get past that first barrier. Then when you start going out and you start meeting women or approaching women, right? First off, I want you to realize that every other person in the world is a woman. Every other person in the world has a vagina. And ironically, all those women, almost all those women, like, maybe there's a girl who's diseased somewhere and she, like, physically can't have sex or she'll die. But, like, most of those women want to have sex with a guy. Most of those women want to find a dude who can fulfill her too and be her knight in shining armor, whatever it is, right? So just knowing that alone, there's an abundance of women. There's a whole sea of women, right? And this is not new. It's not like I'm philosophizing or saying some, like, profound thought that nobody's ever said before, but it's just like almost like giving yourself the perspective, like, dude, there's a lot of women out there, and if you just go out and start talking to them, right? Now we can go one step further. So when you're in an interaction with a woman that you find intriguing, with a woman that you find interesting, don't put her on the pedestal. And in fact, don't see her as some prize that you got to work for and show your value to. Rather, start thinking of yourself as value. And if you can't do that, then you got to work on your confidence. And that's where I'd start with someone. But if you're going out and you're meeting a woman and you find her intriguing, you think she's attractive, and you're in conversation with her, stop selling yourself to her. Stop doing these big, nice romantic gestures just so she'll approve of you. And that way you can get the validation and feel good about yourself at the end of the day. Feel good about yourself first, then go talk to that girl. And whether or not you find her intriguing, just say to yourself, and it's all about the language that you say to yourself. You don't say, that girl's hot, I got to go out over there and pick her up, because that's already saying that she's a prize that I got to win. You say, I find her intriguing, I want to go over there and see what else she's got to her personality. See if she's someone that is worth bringing into my life. And if you just switch the language up in your own head, you can go into that interaction, and now you're not framing her as above you. You're framing her as your equal, and you're seeing if she actually meets your criteria from there. Right? Does that make sense?
Sure. Tell me about maybe your most interesting client you've had, like someone that maybe came at the whole thing from a different perspective, or something that you didn't really expect, or something that was kind of unique.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or are they all the same?
Uh, well, I would say one of the guys who I really enjoyed working with lately. He's not a client of mine anymore, but it is because he got the girl that he wanted. And so we're no longer working with each other. But I really enjoyed working with him for that period of time, because not only, like I said, I highly qualify these guys as the type of people who are coachable and are willing to take action. And have realistic expectations for themselves. And when I say realistic, I mean, like, if you've never had sex before, I don't want you to think that your only definition of success is sleeping with 100 women by next month, right? So, but if you want to go out, rack up the numbers, fine, we can give you the tools. So this guy, I saw a lot of myself in him, whereas he was in his early 20s. And he was very much like me, to where he was inexperienced with women. He wasn't necessarily like super socially awkward, but the only thing that we had to really work on was exactly what I described to you. He was in scarcity, and it was all because of his mindset and how he thought the dating process, the seduction process worked out, right? And so when I can see where he's at, and I have the bird's eye view, the perspective to go like, dude, this is the path you need to walk down. And anytime you veer off the path, I just kind of course correct you from the outside looking in. It was really rewarding, because he saw some massive improvements really fast, and it was all because of his mindset. And the major one was, there was this girl, he really liked her. And this was the type of guy who he didn't even want to necessarily go out and sleep with a bunch of women, right? In fact, he told me before we started working with each other that he was the type of guy who really wanted to save it for marriage. And he wanted to know if I thought that was all right. And I was like, dude, if you want to save having sex for marriage, that's perfectly fine, right? And that's easy. No more power to you. I'm going to give you the tools to get you there, right? And so that way you can choose the woman who you want to marry from a place of abundance once again, right? And so this girl that he really wanted to date, he was telling me like, dude, I want to marry her. She's awesome. And I'm like, awesome. How many dates have you been on with her? And he goes, I mean, I got her number, right? I'm like, all right, first off, you told me you want to marry this girl and you've only gotten her number. You haven't even been on a date with her, right? So for him, it was about the mindset, changing the mindset, and most importantly, like changing the words you use when you refer to these women, because automatically he's placing her above him. He's putting her on the pedestal. So I said, let's just change the language. Every time you think a girl's awesome or you want to marry her, stop saying to yourself, I want to marry that girl. She's the one for me. Start saying, she's intriguing to me. Let's find out what else she has to offer. Simple mindset shift, but it really worked out for him, because actually the girl who he told me originally, like, I want to marry her, he ended up having awesome dates with her, and now they're hopefully doing some great things with each other,
Well, what have you learned from some of your clients? Have you picked up some interesting ideas from them? Is there some that you actually found that they taught you something?
I would say with my clients, I've more learned that not everybody has the same goals, but to get you to where you want to go, it takes the same fundamental tools. I'm not sure if that's necessarily like the best answer to that question, but a lot of what I'm teaching now, and a lot of the way I kind of frame my teaching really comes from my experience with the people who I work with one-on-one. And keep in mind, like, the majority of the stuff I do is online, and with my YouTube channel, with my email list, with all that stuff. And maybe I'll have an event with a bunch of guys coming to it. But the guys who I work with one-on-one specifically, these are guys who come to me and they have, originally I asked them, like, what are your goals here? Like, what do you want to accomplish over the next 1, 3, 5 years with your dating life? These are guys coming to me from like all different walks of life. These are guys who are in their 40s, who are fresh out of a long-term marriage, and they don't even know where to start. And they got kids. I got a guy who's, he's a 28-year-old virgin and he's never even kissed a girl. And then I got guys who are everywhere in between, right? And I think the one thing I realized is that so many guys are really just afraid of that in-person interaction, and they're trying to almost like, once they realize like what they're capable of, and they develop the confidence in their own abilities to go out and actually implement and execute. I think from there, it's all the same fundamental tools, but the goals are different. And I think that really helped me as far as like learning as a coach to tailor my message and really know where a lot of these guys are coming from, if that makes sense.
Okay. I guess I was curious, what's your own philosophy about relationships? Are you someone that, expects at one point to get married and have a, one-on-one serious relationship? Or are you more the abundant guy that wants to, I guess, have a lot of different relationships and be unattached to the outcome, which, there's a lot of philosophy about that as well out there.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I would say that I'm definitely the type of guy who's open to like changing my paradigm as I go. So originally, before I even got into dating advice, before I even knew approaching, like you could approach a girl out in public. Oh my God. For me at the time, like it was, again, unconsciously incompetent. I didn't even know what I didn't even know. Right. And for me back then, I had a plan. I was like, I want to get married by 28. I want to have kids before I'm 30. And I want to have this one awesome girl who's like the one for me. She's my soulmate, blah, 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 blah. And then when I got to the place of inspiration and desperation, and I went out and started meeting more women, I was like, holy crap, my life is not at all. It doesn't have to be the plan that I thought it had to be growing up. That's not a set in stone path that I have to take. Right. And so at that phase of my life, I was like, well, why would I get into a relationship now? I'm in my 20s. I'm young. I'm going to go out. I'm going to play the field. I'm going to learn what I prefer in women by dating and having an abundance of them. And then over the last couple of years, literally like a year and a half ago, I was in a place to where, I was in abundance with women. I had different women that I could have been dating at the time or that I was dating at the time. And then I got into a long-term relationship. So right now I actually have a girlfriend. She lives with me. And I can't say that I necessarily think I'm going to get married anytime soon. But once again, I'm just kind of taking it day by day. But at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, like whether you want that one awesome ride or die chick who's going to be your like, help you build an empire in life and you guys are just taking over the world together, or you want to just go out, you want to be single for the rest of your life and you want to, bang 100 women or just like have an abundance with women, that's fine. I've been in both phases of my life. I was in the phase where I had a lot of women. I was single for a long time and I didn't want anything more than that. Right now, I'm kind of in the empire building phase of my life to where I'm building my business. I'm really working on myself and traveling and developing deeper relationships with one awesome girl who I chose, once again, from abundance. And that's where I am now. So like I said, my philosophy, I wouldn't say I think necessarily one way is better than the other. I think it really just depends on what your preferences and goals are for that phase of your life.
Let me go back a little bit and ask you a question about escalation. What do you how do you advise your clients in terms of moving to the physical with women?
So right off the bat, don't wait to break that touch barrier, right? And so I really love this question because I literally have a whole program on escalation. I call it Escalation Secrets. So to break it down as simply as I possibly can, right? The way I view it, and I don't know, maybe other people have taught this before, and this is just kind of the way I picture it. But have you ever seen like that picture of like Jesus and he's like standing here with all of his limbs like spread out like this? Yeah. You ever seen that picture? Sure. So the way I see it is if you draw a straight line down the middle of that guy's body, right? I would say that's like your center line. And I like to call it, what do I call it? I call it the zones of intimacy, right? So the further away you go from that center line, the least intimate part of that body is, right? So your hands are obviously a little bit less intimate than the center of your chest, right? And so the way I say, if you want to break the touch barrier, first off, do it right off the bat. And the way you do it is you start in less intimate zones of intimacy and you work your way in throughout the course of your interaction. So obviously, when I first meet a girl, right, and this is the most common example, when I first meet a girl, I'm probably going to shake her hand. To me, that's breaking the touch barrier. And for most guys, obviously, they can shake hands with women. People shake hands all the time. But I like to use that moment as a moment to maybe spark a little bit of tension, whether it's verbally or just like I hold the handshake and I make strong, almost like the bedroom eyes, strong, laser focused, dominant eye contact. And I go, hi, my name's Patrick. What's your name? And I'm holding her hand the whole time. And maybe it's like an extended handshake. But for me, like that's a way to break the touch barrier. And because that moment between you two was a little bit different than the standard handshake, that opens up the window of opportunity for me. Like maybe 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, I'm teasing her about something and I kind of just gently nudge her on the arm. Now I moved from the hand to gently nudging her on the arm. Maybe 10 minutes later after that, if we're in a little bit loud environment, maybe there's people around and it's kind of hard to hear, I lean in and I whisper what I'm saying into her ear so that way she can hear me better. But while I lean in and whisper to her ear, I put my hand on her shoulder or on her back, or maybe on her waist. And I'm doing that as I'm saying it. And it's almost like the motion of me leaning in to say something into her ear, plus me putting my hand on her center. Obviously, I'm working my way towards the center to the more intimate parts of her body, but it's almost like the bigger motion disguised the smaller motion, and it made it more natural, right? And so, if you keep progressing through that kind of like way of doing things, and you're spiking attraction, you're amplifying the sexual tension that already naturally exists between men and women, it's only natural that line of like breaking the touch barrier is going to eventually lead to you and her, kissing on the cheek, kissing on the lips, behind closed doors, that type of thing, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay. Maybe you can tell the listeners here a little bit more about what you have to offer them in terms of your products or coaching, and where they can reach you, and how they can learn more from you.
For sure. So I have a YouTube channel. If you want to look up any more of my videos or my advice, it's called Patrick James Raw Dating Advice. If you type either one of those on the YouTube search bar, you'll find me. And then if you want to invest in one of my products, my best-selling book, I'm currently giving it away for free right now while supplies last. It's called 107 Proven Ways to Get the Girl, The Raw Secrets of Attracting Women Anytime, Anywhere. And so anything basically attraction related that we've been talking about today is talked about in great depth in this book. Literally, this whole book talks about how to take that moment, that window of opportunity to amplify the tension between you and any woman that you're interacting with, whether it's during the day and you happen to meet her or pass her in the hallway, or at night you approach her at a bar. How do you spark the tension, spark the intrigue, create that attraction, and then maintain it over the course of your interaction with her, whether it's that night, the next 2 weeks, or the next 2 years. This is all about attraction, and you can get this for free at howtogetthegirlnow.com, or I'm sure that Cliff will have a link around this video somewhere.
Okay. And in terms of your coaching?
Yeah, so coaching, you can just shoot me an email. So basically, if you get this book, you'll be added to my email list. And then all the coaching options are on there. And I have all the courses, but this is really, if you're new to me, my brand, I definitely recommend starting out with this book. And then if you want to invest in any other courses, they'll really build on top of this book and complement this book. And yeah, we'll just take it from there.
Well, that's good. Look, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for having spent this time with me and telling people about your ideas and your experience. And I think the guys are going to get a lot out of this interview, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments that come back on it.
Awesome. Once again, thank you, Cliff, for having me on. I know you've been around for a while, and I definitely read about you in the game. We talked about this earlier. So it's a pleasure getting to meet you finally and speak with you as well. So thank you for having me on.
Sounds great. And hopefully we'll do another one of these pretty soon again.
Of course.